All right, Steve, you should be good to go.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Let me begin with our admonition under the state government. Members of the subcommittee are advised of their duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflict, and are instructed to refrain from participating in any matter coming before this subcommittee with respect to which there is a conflict of interest or an appearance of conflict. Anyone have a conflict to report today at the onset? Okay, we can begin. Welcome to all the members of the subcommittee and the staff and leadership. This is meeting was convened to just have a final review of our work prior to the quarterly meeting and make some decisions about what it is that we want to take to the whole ethics committee concerning both the proposed changes to the preamble and our also any other anti-discrimination comments we have concerning our other deliberations as to Rule 8.4. So I think I'll look to staff to give us just a brief update on the preamble. Of course, we've received, and hopefully most of you have gotten to swim through most of the comments. And we had comments both the last time the proposed preamble was published, and some further comments this time, some from the same folks. There are a few different people who have chimed in. But if you, Brian or Carmen, want to give us a brief summary, might point us in the right direction.
Absolutely. And actually, before we do that, Steve, could we get the approval of the minutes for the last subcommittee meeting?
Yeah, we do need the approval of the minutes, or I need a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting, which was...
I move that they be approved as submitted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are adopted. Thank you, Brian.
Great, thank you. So turning to the comments, we have in your materials, and I apologize, I realize that there's kind of a duplicative comments there. I've included 2 copies of some of the comments there, but nevertheless, in your materials, you do have all the comments that we received regarding the preamble. You'll see this isn't as large volume as the prior publication, but of course the prior round we received a lot of comments that were based not just on the published version of the preamble, but also just the general notion of the State Bar undertaking a study concerning the inclusion of anti-discrimination language in the rules of professional conduct, be it in the preamble or the rule itself. So you'll see kind of at the outset, just to explain the materials, of course, see the table of the folks that did submit a comment. If they're associated with a particular organization, that is noted there as well as just a note about the prior comments that we received, because I think it's one of those things that, you know, given the preambles, the composition of the preamble now being different from what was previously published, but I think that the message being very similar, that it may not be accurate to just kind of presume that those that did not once again reiterate their support, that their silence means that they either don't support this now, or that they are in some way wavering. So I just wanted to include the prior statistics from that prior publication round. But generally speaking, without going into incredible detail on the comments, like you said, Steve, we've got a lot of comments from folks who had previously submitted comments on the prior publication. These comments range. There are some that are opposed, some that are in favor. We've got, in particular, for support for the preamble, we've got letters from the Equal Justice Alliance. We've got the North Carolina Advocates for Justice, as well as the North Carolina Association of Women Attorneys, who represent some fairly large members or membership organizations. And then those that submitted comments opposed, we have some individuals, as well as one particular letter that was signed by 36 other lawyers. So the support, I think, is, those letters are pretty quick, pretty clear. Just advocating their support for the notion that yes, people should be treated equally and fairly. As lawyers in our professional capacity, we shouldn't essentially discriminate against anybody in just how we treat them. But of course, understanding also that the preamble is aspirational. This is should and not shall, and therefore it can't be enforced. The comments that are opposed really kind of, I guess there's some additional or some of the same things that we saw before. The question about whether aspirational language can be enforced. I know one particular person that was commenting, frankly, just did not agree or did not believe that something that's stated as aspirational would not be enforced. There are a number of comments about a kind of a question of a slippery slope that this is on, that there's a feeling that the preamble will, if amended in this manner, will result somewhere down the road in it being enforced, or that the language could somehow be used in terms of a grievance prosecution. There's some other recommendations or just some, I guess, some requests for consideration. One particular commenter just suggested removing the individually listed personal characteristics because of the fear that essentially the statement is creating a protected class or offering protected class status to particular characteristics that I guess people with particular religious beliefs would consider just immoral. And particularly they were looking at sexual orientation, gender identity, things of that nature. And then another person had suggested a kind of an amended approach to the preamble, which was more, again, eliminating the personal characteristics as individually listed and just saying, all people should be treated equally and fairly. Although the one particular comment that that was submitted also included a provision that kind of referenced the notion of with everybody being created equal by their creator. And I think for whatever it's worth, I would advise the subcommittee not to go down that pathway, but for the fear of potential establishment clause considerations. But nevertheless, the comments, I think, speak for themselves. And again, like you said, Steve, there's a lot of stuff that we're seeing some of the same authors as well as the same objections as before. And I think it's really up to the subcommittee now to determine exactly what is the next step. What does the subcommittee recommend to the full ethics committee? Do these comments perhaps persuade you to take a different approach, to amend the current proposal? Or do you feel that the recommendation from the subcommittee should be to both the ethics and executive committees and ultimately to the council for adoption? So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I stand by our recommendation. I mean, unless legal staff can say that any of these comments opposed raise some challenges that they're concerned about, I say we stay on this path because it's the right thing to do.
This is Dorothy. I agree 100%. I think we should stay the course and not waver, and just recommend what we initially agreed to.
I would just say, in an effort to unmuddy the waters from the disciplinary perspective, I mean, I think by definition, a preamble to a set of rules is not enforceable. I mean, that's kind of what a preamble is. But also more specifically, there are 0 instances in which the state bar has brought any kind of disciplinary action based on language in the preamble. And also, I think the best illustration of that is that the preamble also very strongly encourages lawyers to do pro bono work. And at no time has it ever been suggested that a lawyer is unethical or doing the wrong thing simply because the pro bono work wasn't completed. So I don't think that those kinds of arguments are really based in fact.
Could I just add to that, if we just continue to keep this kind of open in this way, we'll just continue to get, comments on both sides, and it just keeps spinning the same wheels that it seems like it's the same wheels that keep getting spin. So I think the sooner we can go ahead and move it forward, the better.
And unless, like I said, unless Carmen or Brian, you tell this group that anyone has raised something that you believe poses a problem from a constitutional or legal standpoint, I don't see any reason not to put this recommendation in effect.
All right, and I won't speak for Carmen. I'll let Carmen offer her perspective, but I have not seen anything that changes my perspective.
Good.
I see a thumbs up from Carmen.
Are there other committee members who have a different opinion or want to offer any thoughts concerning what Alan and Dorothy have indicated that we should go forward with what has been drafted?
If you're looking for consensus, Steve, I agree with what they've said.
Likewise.
Me too. Great.
All right, I'm not hearing much in the way of dissent. I will tell you though, I do want to point out one comment that caught my eye from my friend Jonathan McGirt, who is always thoughtful in the comments he proposes to the bar and also to our section at the NCBA. But he has, I think, given us some food for thought as we go forward in our work as to what does treated equally mean, and of course professional capacity, which is something I think that we have talked about defining better in our work as we go forward in consideration of a possible rule. I'd be interested in what the staff thinks about those comments in light of this is the preamble, and we don't really define sort of terms that are commonly understood to have a general meaning, and we're not really down to the disciplinary brass tacks in this. So I'd just be curious as to staff's comments on that, but I would certainly endorse the committee's proposal to take our draft to the full committee.
I think, Steve, I think you're right. I think Mr. McGirt's observations it's something we would want to look at when we are talking about an enforceable rule, but questions of vagueness or overbreadth, which seems to be essentially what he's getting at, really aren't relevant if what we are talking about enacting is not a restraint on speech, which it is not. So I think we should table that, hang on to it, revisit it if we are looking to create robust definitions and an enforceable rule.
As hard as we've tried, this is still, people are looking at this as if it's the rule. I mean, they're conflated. We tried to pull them apart, but I don't think, still people are looking at this as if it's going to be used against them. And all we can do is keep giving the message that this is aspirational. I don't know how really anybody could say they didn't aspire to what we've got in there, but it's the rule and it's discipline that they're worried about.
Yeah, I agree with you, Barbara. And I think that I had kind of two thoughts. One was the concern about certain terms being defined. A lot of these terms are, I guess I would say, very commonly used. I know Mr. McGirt raised the question of what exactly does race and sex mean? And I think that's kind of getting into some incredible sort of nitpicky thing to have to define exactly what I think we all understand when we say sex or race. And so, to have some sort of list of or explicit definition of what we mean for an aspirational preamble term, I think is unnecessary for one, but also impractical. But I think to another point, and this is raised by another comment that we're kind of talking about, which you just raised, Barbara, about just how else do we communicate this is aspirational. I have to point out that the North Carolina Advocates for Justice, in their comments, suggested that the council consider adopting an amendment to the scope, similar to what we saw in 2010. Back in 2010, there was kind of, in addition to a potential preamble amendment, there was a proposed amendment to the scope section of the rules of professional conduct that explicitly stated the preamble is aspirational and not enforceable. I will say that, I guess, in kind of staffing this subcommittee and in working with the ethics committee and creating these proposals, I've not thought that that was necessary. I think, I understand why it was proposed before, but I think the very nature of the preamble, I think the language itself is inherently aspirational and unenforceable. And so that's why I personally have not suggested that we kind of create another amendment that states that which I think is already reasonable and obvious. But nevertheless, that is a proposal that the NCAJ has put forth here that could be helpful to clarify things if we feel like it really needs to be clarified. But I just wanted to point out that particular part of the NCAJ proposal.
That might have been good in hindsight, but I don't want to wait that much longer.
And I think that's the NCAJ's position. They do still support the preamble proposal, and they would support its adoption. I think they were just mentioning that as kind of a in addition to. So that could be taken up by the subcommittee at a later point if we really feel it's necessary. But again, as for what I think in terms of constitutional concerns and things of that nature, I think Carmen and I are on the same page that we don't necessarily think that it's necessary, particularly with regards to those those questions of whether this is constitutional and something that we can defend should legal action commence.
It's not going to change some minds anyway.
Right.
Good point, Barbara.
All right, there's one other item lingering from our last meeting, and that is, do we want to recommend to the full ethics committee that another subcommittee be formed concerning Rule 1.19? And that's something that I think we should discuss among ourselves and decide whether or not we want to do that. It came up in the context of one of the hypotheticals that we talked about, where inappropriate sexual conduct did not include sex itself, and whether or not we need to evaluate that rule to broaden it some. So are there any comments on whether or not we should make a recommendation to form a separate subcommittee? We sure don't want it in this subcommittee.
Well, as the primary enforcer of Rule 1.19, I have some thoughts on this. I actually was talking to some of my colleagues from other jurisdictions about a presentation we're doing, and learned that at least Ohio and probably some other states have a different version of Rule 1.19 that does specifically include a prohibition on sending explicit images to your clients. That was basically what started this discussion here. And I just think in the 21st century, that is a very legitimate thing for us to consider and include, and it definitely comes up in real world fact patterns. So I think it would be great for the state bar to re-examine that rule and see if there's a way that we can make it, modernize it, if you will.
I think that's a good idea as well. It avoids defense attorneys like me being able to say 1.19 is not applicable to the conduct in question.
Anything that makes your job harder, Alan. Let's get it done.
Thank you, Carmen.
Do we need a separate subcommittee for that, though, Carmen? I think we decided that we prefer to do it that way, but if it's as simple as that, as what you just said, or
I just feel like this subcommittee has such intense work, and that probably a subcommittee on 1.19 could meet 2 or 3 times, come up with a recommendation, and then be disbanded. It seems like you all have so much you're already working on. It might be easier just to hand that off to someone else. Although I think I did sort of semi hear Dorothy volunteer to help with 1.19. So
You heard it loud and clear, Carmen. Not semi, you heard it loud and clear. I'm all for it.
all right. So see, we've already got a chair volunteer. We just need a few other people. And frankly, of all the ethics subcommittees, I feel like we could get some volunteers for this one pretty easily.
And if I can add also, I think this would be a great opportunity to have kind of a hybrid grievance and ethics subcommittee. So we can have some folks from both sides of that coin that can talk about any sort of revisions, both, in terms of what should be prohibited as well as what's going to be practically effective for prosecution.
In that case, I'll volunteer.
All right, well then, I guess the proposal before the subcommittee is to recommend the language as adopted at our last meeting concerning the preamble, and to recommend it to the committee for publication. In addition, to recommend the formation of a subcommittee to study Rule 1.19 to determine whether its scope should be broadened to deal with the technological issues.
And Brian, will you go ahead and speak to either Matt or Catherine Jean or both about that if you're viewing a hybrid?
Yes, absolutely.
Do we need a motion for that, Brian?
I think it would be good to have a motion, particularly on the stance on the preamble. That way we can have this being a formal recommendation from the subcommittee.
Do we have a motion that we adopt the preamble language?
I'll
as
move.
put
I'll
forward?
make a motion.
Alan?
Second.
Dorothy, second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. That will be the recommendation of the subcommittee. Thank you all.
All right. Well, Steve, I think that's everything. I think you can make the report then at the full committee, the outcome of this particular subcommittee meeting, as well as the recommendation to create this separate subcommittee to study 1.19. But with that, I believe that covers our agenda.
Okay, great. Good. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time today. I know the subcommittee work has been intense lately, so thanks.
Nice
We're
to
adjourned.
see everyone.
All right. And we'll be in
Have a
touch
good
with
evening.
everybody. We'll be in touch with everybody after the meeting as far as next steps for the remainder of our work. So, but we'll keep going.
Awesome.
Thank you, Brian and Carmen.
Thank you.
And Liza. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Hey, Brian. Are we still
Hello.
live?